Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we're gonna go over a movement that's really popular in CrossFit, and this is the thruster. Okay, so basically, you have combining a front loaded barbell squat with an overhead press. Um, the idea behind any kind of movement pattern, especially in CrossFit, powerlifting, not powerlifting, excuse me, or it should be termed powerlifting, Olympic lifting, generating power, right? So we're generally starting off the movement relatively slow. We have complete control over the range of motion and acceleration throughout a range of motion. So you're not just dive bombing stuff where you're just dropping and then catching yourself in a free fall. We want to go quickly, but we definitely want to have control over the entire range of motion, remembering that it is the sudden onset of either a maximal or submaximal load that is a common mechanism for injury in tendons and ligaments. Okay, because once the tendon goes, ligaments gonna go stretch next. Okay, and ligaments don't like to be stretched. They like to be tight. They're holding the joint together, and it compresses everything together, keeps it nice and tight, and in the alignment, that inner tissue keeps it in alignment so that it moves and tracks in the proper direction that joint was intended to move in. Okay, so but a sudden onset of a load, any load, is a common mechanism for injury. So it is this all of a sudden, boom, I have to catch this. And the muscles are tight and they tighten up, but your tendons, which is what connects the muscle to the bone, doesn't like to really stretch much. And that attachment site where it connects to the bone is actually the anchor point that's getting really stressed at that point. So if we have too much of these uncontrolled loading patterns or alterations in movement that create friction across that tendon, we start to get tendonitis. The itis is inflammation. So those tendons start to become inflamed because they're hitting stuff that they're not supposed to, or they're just automatically getting jerked and pulled and jostled, and nobody likes that. And then if that continues without being corrected for, then the tendon will start to thin out and stretch. Okay? And this is called tendinosis. Okay? And so before long, you have a complete rupture or detachment from the bone, and we don't want this. So no matter how fast you're moving, please, please, please maintain control over the range of motion that you're working in from start to finish. That doesn't mean that you can't go fast. Please do. Go very slow and controlled in the eccentric lengthening. Look for a deep ass burning stretch in the muscles, especially if we're looking for hypertrophy, but get that stretch. That's how you know you're really in the end range of motion there, not just at the end of your elasticity. We also want to pull and make sure that we're really, really deep into that range so that we get the biggest stretch in the muscle. And then we have an intentional isometric contractional loading phase before we initiate a super powerful concentric pattern. Explode. But not from zero to explode. From zero to intentionally tensing and then exploding and carrying that out through a range of motion. Nothing is just bam. That's what injures. So, develop control, develop mobility, flexibility, strength, those together equal mobility, okay? Flexibility and strength together, mobility. Neuromuscular control means like intentionally try to move things that you normally think are automatic. A lot of the things that we think just automatically happen do not just automatically happen. Especially if you're an untrained individual who is now an athlete and have pain and or previous injuries. A lot of these mechanisms and activations shut off. We develop synergistic dominance, and then it just results in greater injury because now we're using a small muscle to do the movement of a big muscle. Okay. Years ago, I had an ulnar abutment, which is a shortening of the ulnar bone. Right. So they slice the section out, they pull it together, and they put a bar and screws and everything in there just to keep it in there and straight. And so years ago, this affected my ability to properly supinate at the wrist. So supinate is moving our palm up. So what happened to me was I actually didn't even realize it until after I hurt my shoulder. But I had compensated for this supination by also overly externally rotating and putting pressure in my bicipital groove and over here on my teres muscle in the rotator cuff. Okay, so that's an overactivation and it causes a pinch. So I actually have to use an easy bar curl versus a barbell curl because I don't have the range of motion. So I would have to compensate, and that causes further problems. So being aware of these things and training accordingly is key to avoiding further injury and the vicious cycle of rehab, injury, repeat. Just don't do it. Get Tucker method. Say goodbye to traditional physical therapy. Get Tucker method. Neuromuscular approach to physical development and rehabilitation. Get it today. If you're struggling with your weight, same thing. Get us on board for your nutritional coaching. There's many things that are mainstream that work well, and there's many nuances that are personal for you that really just kind of keep you from being able to gain or lose the weight that you want. So, Tucker method. Let's get it done. Now I'm going to demonstrate this squat thruster. Okay, so again, it's a front-loaded squat, barbell squat. This is typically recommended poundage, I think, in CrossFit. So we have a 45-pound barbell, and we have 25-pound plates. That equals 95 pounds total for a thruster. The key in this is not to load this squat like we would a low bar back squat deep into the hamstrings and glutes. Okay, the key here is to stay upright because we're going to be in a front rack position, and we're going to come down with our lumbar spine stretched. So when we're upright, and this is a lot of the problem when people have low back pain in a high bar squat, is that they're overarching or tilting their pelvis and trying to stay upright to backload a squat. So on a front loaded or high bar squat, we actually want to be out, rotated out a little bit more so you can just kind of come right down in between, much like a goblet squat, but we're in a rack position from the bar. Okay, and so when we do that, we're going to really squeeze this part of our abdomen and crunch it so that when we come into the squat, we're squatting straight down and we're looking straight ahead. Some people can actually have a kyphotic curve here, but we're not rounding the lumbar spine. right? It's just from here, and then they can come straight up this way. And if there's pain in the hips, play with the degree of rotation. Some people can come in really narrow. Okay? And some people have to get a little wider so that we can open up and not have any kind of hip impingement in the bony socket of your pelvis here. Never good. If it's too far out, we're gonna feel it way out here. If it's too far in, we're gonna feel it here more in the hip crease where the hip flexor muscles cross that inguinal section of your pelvis here. Okay, so and this just has to do with the way that your bones are formed. Some people have really big, pronounced iliac bones, and some people don't. Some people have really, gapped and mobile SI joints. Some people have great annotation, which is your hips actually rotate opposite each other in this way when we walk. So it has to have a great degree of mobility. So keeping it straight and flat and in one position all the time also isn't good. So we need to practice moving in different ranges of motion and be aware of which ones or the degree of turn or rotation in a joint feels good and feels not so good. And so if we get outside of that Goldilocks zone of being just right, we start to have pain and stressors on tissues that we don't want stress on. So a lot of times when we talk about your knee tracking in a squat, we want it to be, oh my God, it doesn't have to be straight all the time, but we don't want it to go typically track inward beyond the big toe, and then we don't want it to track out so much to where it's beyond the pinky on the little toe side. So that degree of rotation on either way, internal or external rotation of the femur, is going to result in knee pain, either medially or laterally. Okay? So whatever degree your toe is turned out, that should be where your knee tracks. And thus how much flexibility we need in the adductors and in the hips. Okay? So, but if we're having to pitch our hips because our femurs are hitting our abdomen, you're gonna need to go wider and more turned out. We gotta get down in between the legs. So there you go. Alright, so standard grip, we're gonna grab this just like we would in a standing overhead press. We're gonna allow for a turnout so that there's an opened angle near the ulna, which is the pinky side. We're gonna grab the bar first from the pinky. The forefinger and thumb are relatively loose in this type of grip. We're gonna rotate the elbows down. This is gonna engage your lats and keep your forearm close to your rib cage. Now again, I have a shoulder injury in the right side, so I have greater external rotation on that side, so I'm not gonna focus on that side as much. I'm going to intentionally slap down on this left side so that the right side can balance out and be even with the left. And so even though I have this injury and pain, I can tell that I've been doing this for a long time because my lats on the right side are noticeably bigger than on the left side. So now we're training for compensation and symmetry. So here, I'm gonna turn down hard on the the left, but not the right. I'm gonna rack near the collarbone. We're coming off. I'm gonna set my feet. with the appropriate width and turnout, I'm going to right here squeeze my butt and my stomach. And then we're gonna go into the squat. We're just gonna do 10. And there's your thruster. Okay, so thruster, front squat, elbows to knees. We're bracing our core and coming up out of the bottom with our legs and our glutes, not by arching our back. Okay, so we're squeezing down with the glutes, and we're squeezing up and in here, and then we're pulling back in the head to keep the chest extended and the back flat, not overly arched in lordosis, and not tucked to where my knees are bending, right? Like a lot of people you see, they stand up like this and they can't actually straighten their legs because they're so tucked under, okay? We just want flatness, neutral spine, okay? So this was my 5th set, so that's 50. Work on it, get it done, okay? Combine that with some cardio. CrossFit's doing bikes and burpees today in combination with this. They're doing 2-minute intervals. So wherever you get your program from is good, man. Do it with intensity. Sometimes we do cross training. And right now, CrossFit is the brand for that. My brother runs Elite CrossFit in San Antonio. Tucker Method. This is what we do. We take people and we help them to achieve the greatest potential that they want for themselves. Through nutrition, through personal training, through intensity, understanding your body, but most importantly, delivering on consistency and intensity. Deliver. Deliver for yourself, deliver for your family, deliver for whatever you want, your country, your job, your corps, your Navy, your Air Force, your Army, whatever. If you got a wedding coming up, if you got a reunion coming up, don't wait. I don't care if it's in 2 years. Be the baddest motherfucker you can be between now and then. And then by the time you get to that, you won't have to fake it till you make it. You won't have to try. Just be a badass. I'll tell you, some guys join biker clubs so that they can represent as a badass. But I'll tell you, real bikers are bikers because you're already a badass. Somebody was talking to me about that shit yesterday. Don't let your cut be an excuse just to start shit. Be who you are always, no matter if you're wearing your cut or not. No matter if you're wearing your Gymsharks or not. Your Nikes. Like, it doesn't matter what brand you wear. What label you wear. Who you are and what you do with yourself and how you represent yourself and where your disciplines are represent the labels that you try to perpetrate and represent. Right? So, be a natural badass and just do you. And they'll come looking for you. You don't have to go looking for them. Tucker Method in the Bay Area, California. Elite CrossFit in San Antonio. Get it. Wherever your locale, get it. And if you're not local, then get on an online program and figure it out, because it's not that hard. But it does take discipline, it does take support, it does take community. So get on it.